Blizzard's Wake, Chapter 14. When Jesse came downstairs on Saturday morning, his father had the Grand Forks Herald spread out on the breakfast table. A bold headline read, Central, Wops clash tonight for state Class A cage title. We'll whoop 'em all right, Jesse said to his dad. Sports. His father handed him the sports page without bothering to look up, and Jesse poured himself a glass of canned juice and settled down to read the story. When he'd finished, he'd glanced at the section his dad was reading, with headlines like Franklin Roosevelt addresses nation tonight on aid program, and Yugoslavs stiffen attitude towards Germany's demands, and Germans, British continue to swap heavy air blows. He studied his father for a moment. The gray hairs at the back of his neck that curled down over his shirt collar, the nick on his chin from his razor, the faint brown age spots just visible on the back of his hands. Sometimes he seemed old. Do you think they'll come over here, Dad? Jesse asked finally. His father stopped reading and looked up. Who? The Nazis. Well, the ocean's pretty wide for that, Jesse. How come guys are being drafted and we're not even at war yet? Because the president figures we soon will be, I imagine. Jesse's lips seemed to stick together as he asked the next question. Do you think it'll still be going on when I'm 21? I hope to God it's not. Doc Sterling looked over at him, gave him a reassuring smile. Right now, that's Roosevelt's problem. You and I have to figure out how much we can get done today. I already did my homework, Jesse told him. I can still go to the rink, can't I? Don't see why not. His father tipped his head back and held the newspaper up in front of him, looking for the weather forecast. Considerable cloudiness with light snow Saturday and Sunday, colder Sunday, he read. Of course we'll go. I've got to run the income tax forms to the post office, and we've got some medicines to deliver. Jesse pointed at the ad in the paper. Valley Motors having a Big 10 sale, Dad. Look, free trial usage for 10 days, he grinned. Want to drive a new car around for 10 days just to see how it feels? His father smiled back. Better not, he said. Old Gertie might get jealous. Gertie was the doctor's 1931 Model A Ford, almost a second home to Doc Sterling because he spent so much time in it. In fact, if anyone were to ride in the back seat, he'd have to first push aside all the necessities, as the doctor called them, the supplies he carried in case he was waiting for a baby to be born and needed to sleep. In a noisy household, he might return to the quiet of his car, fortify himself with a tin of crackers and a jar of cold tea, which he replenished daily, then covered himself with a blanket and get in an hour or two of sleep while the baby was thinking it over. Also in the back of the car was a raincoat, should he ever have to change a tire in the rain, a box of spare parts, matches, a sweater, and other assorted oddities that had sat around in bags or boxes, some unused and unneeded, for 7 or 8 years. He was not a neat man, except for when it came to incisions and stitches. Jesse had often heard his sister complain about the way Dad kept his bedroom, with clothes and towels strewn all over, and the way that he left stacks of unread magazines and journals in teetering piles around his office. She didn't complain to her father. She complained to Jesse. But he figured that if you had to be so precise and careful in one part of your life, maybe it was good to let a little go somewhere else. We really do need a new car, Jesse said. No radio, no heater, and the horn sticks. I know, his father said. It's dangerous, Dad. Sometimes the horn works and sometimes it doesn't. You might need it real quick sometimes and then nothing happens. Just seems to me that when I think about all I've got to do every day, Gertie's horn takes second place to most everything, Doc Sterling said. Now, this afternoon I have to drop my income tax off before I make my house calls, so we'd better leave about 1:30. He winked at Jesse. And if we take the long way around to the post office and drive by Valley Motors, I don't suppose Gertie will notice as long as you understand that we're just looking. All right, Jesse said. Then hesitated. He said, There aren't any babies due, are there? He was always afraid that when we rode in the father with his car and his dad was supposed to pick him up later, that there would be a patient in labor and Jesse would be stuck out in the car for 5 or 6 hours waiting for some baby to be born. Not any of them close. But in my business, Jesse, there's always room for surprises, his father said. and then he pushed away the table and took his dishes to the sink. Hoped I could get those limbs out back. We're running low on the stove wood. Well, that axe will have to wait till tomorrow, I guess. Even though there was a coal-burning furnace in the cellar, there was a pot-bellied stove in the parlor where patients waited their turn to see the doctor. Early each morning, Jesse would hear the scrape of his father's shovel down the coal bin. And after a while, he would feel the heat from the register spreading across his face, warming the air he breathed. If his father didn't bank the furnace before he went to bed each night, the fire would go out entirely and the house would get so cold that the toilets would freeze over. The big old house was drafty, so it was Jesse's job to keep the parlor warm for Dad's patients. Every fallen limb, every broken branch on the property was dragged around near the back porch to await chopping block. Jesse opened the door of the icebox and rummaged about among the covered dishes. "Do we have any more of the chocolate pies Mrs. Carpenter made us?" he asked. "If we do, one of those pieces has my name on it," his father said. "If I'm going to do any chopping this weekend, I've got to have something to look forward to when I'm done."